The Missing Witches podcast is entirely listener funded. If you love the project and want to support us, find out how at missingwitches.com.
You aren't being a proper woman, therefore you must be a witch. You must be a witch.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Missing Witches podcast. Hi, Risa.
Hi, Amy. Welcome to another season. I feel it. I feel it washing over me. I'm like emotionally almost so ready for it.
And we are super duper spring equinox bursting forth from the snow and ground with color for all to be sitting in this circle of color, ecstatic and filled with joy to be sharing this Ostara circle with one of our favorite contemporary artists, Maria Molteni.
Yay!
Hello.
Finally.
So happy to be here.
We're so excited to have you. We've been so inspired by your work and your writing, and then not least this concept that you implanted like a tiny seed into our lives that's grown into so much of how we think and how we write. And so to finally get to hang out with you is so magical and cool. Thank you for being here.
Oh, same here. I've been listening to y'all's podcast since the very beginning. So it's like a total honor. Very excited.
It's a dream. We live inside a dream here in the Missing Witches Coven. It is amazing. So for our listeners who haven't encountered your name because they didn't read our first book, where you are quoted, or, don't follow us on Instagram where we're constantly sharing your amazing stuff. Tell us and our listeners a little bit about, or a bit about who you are.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Maria Molteni. And I use they or she pronouns. I have my cute little button that my partner gave me. Isn't that so cute? It's sparkly with stars. And I am mostly visual artist. I identify as a mystic and a witch, sometimes a designer, writer, reader of cards, beekeeper. I kind of spin a lot of plates, wear a lot of hats, depending on the project. And I guess I'm mostly known for some of my large scale public artwork, site specific public artworks, which are, you could say murals, but I guess they're a little more like portals, or I call them altars to the sky, sometimes on basketball courts, sometimes just on the ground or even on a wall. But I've also done a lot of like weird performance art and video and sculpture and participatory stuff with honeybees and movement, over the last 20-ish years. So, and I'm based in Boston, Massachusetts now, on Massachusetts land, but I'm originally from Nashville, Tennessee, where all of my family is. So I'm kind of a funny case of, half of my family is Italian American, but we ended up in the south of the US, whereas most of my Italian American friends are in the Northeast. So I have kind of a funny experience of that. So maybe that's most of it.
There's 12 things that you just said that I want to talk more about. So this is my splatter brain. I want to talk about altars to the sky. I want to talk about basketball. Like, that's such a funny, delightful, delicious piece for me. Like play and game and competition, and your interest in that. Like, it's not something that we cross a lot with witches.
I'm sure.
Do you want to start there?
Sure. Yeah. It's funny because I don't like to only or over identify with basketball, which is why I don't call myself the basketball witch, but you could call me the basketball witch if you want to. Like, I think there actually might be other basketball witches out there, but I might be the first. And yeah, so I basically just grew up playing tons of sports. Basketball was the longest one. I started playing when I was 7 years old. It's I sometimes talk and write about how important it is as like a semi-marginalized community in the South. I'm a person who has inherited white privilege, so but there is, being Catholic, like from a Catholic community in the South of the United States, is still kind of this funny, weird bubble of somewhat marginalized bubble. And because a lot of folks I went to school with were children of immigrants or grandchildren of immigrants in a otherwise kind of Protestant Bible Belt environment. And so sports were actually like the huge focus for how to like kind of prove yourself to the broader society, because if there's anything generally people in the South are into, it's like Jesus and football, or Christianity and sports. And actually basketball has roots. James Naismith sort of invented, if we will, basketball in 1891. And he like actually did a lot of writing. He was like a theologian and a philosopher and a doctor, and he did a lot of writing about the like mind, body, spirit triangle, and tried to develop a game that would address those things. So there's like kind of this bizarre, mystical, you could say, root of basketball, and also the first hoop being a fiber, like being a peach basket, like an example of fiber craft. So there's, and like kind of a recycled, resourceful object. So I'm really interested in the roots of it, but especially because it was invented in Massachusetts where I live now, but I grew up playing it, and just with a lot of pressure. Like my dad's, I was like playing against the daughters of my dad's high school nemesis from like Father Ryan, where he'd gone to Catholic high school. And there's just like a lot of kind of mutual aid, and like I even like got to go to elementary school for free because the church paid for it, and it's just kind of tight in that way. But I was basically taught to play basketball by nuns, because Nashville weirdly enough has like a pretty thriving community of Dominican nuns, and particularly because of the Dominican campus where I went to some of elementary school, which has like a preschool, middle school, high school, convent, like college and convent on the campus. So I mean, you can see NPR actually interviewed these nuns, and like their main photo for the story was the nuns playing basketball, and that's like how it was. Yeah. So I often talk about like the kind of roots of both like my queerness, my feminism, and my spirituality being kind of wrapped up in this whole culture, and also the pressure, and I have an Aries moon. I'm a super Libra, otherwise a Libra sun. So I kind of like have this competitive, like energetic side that really needs to like run around and be active. But then I also have this like kind of, sort of an empath, like peacekeeping, really sensitive side. And it was kind of exhausting being both of those things, as a kid. And, I just honestly, like, I would pray the rosary when I would run cross country. I would pray the rosary when I would shoot free throws. My dad made me shoot like, 100 free throws a day, and, count how many I made. And just to get myself through what was like kind of grueling at the time, I would say these repetitive prayers. And when I like first got out, I went to undergrad for painting, but I kind of hilariously kind of closeted my sports side, because everyone in New England and Massachusetts was so like book smart, and it was kind of it's a different culture in Boston. And I was like, man, all I was doing was playing sports all this time, and also art. When I was like 7 years old, I was like, I'm gonna grow up and be a professional basketball player and an artist and a saint. And so when I got out of undergrad, I was like, I'm just gonna like go back into my life and figure out what I'm about, and kind of shed all this kind of stuff that all these male like dude painters I was studying with were telling me I had to do. And I just started making these like kind of basketball ritual spells with like honey from the bees I was keeping, and doing these repetitive free throw routines while like muttering Hail Marys. And I was just reflecting on this recently, because my recent deck of cards also references the rosary. And I was just looking at some of these photos from like, I think it was 2009 or so, when I was making these like strange performances. Before I really identified as a witch or thought I was doing magic. Yeah, about like the Trinity and queerness and the rosary and sports and running suicides. And it's just kind of cool how it's really come back around in a way. So that's some of the basketball stuff.
Yeah. Oh,
I didn't really speak to the courts. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Okay, can you connect the courts and the spectacular expansive art on the courts and the idea of altars to the sky and the god, etc.? Like, can you take us, help us make that journey from the rosaries and the nuns? I think especially a lot of our listeners do come to this community, to this coven with religious trauma of different kinds. So how did you transmute some really powerful parts of that religious history that you had into this new narrative that you crafted?
Thank you. That's such a great question. And yeah, I think it's really important to recognize the like religious trauma that a lot of us have incurred. And I definitely gravitate towards other friends who have had kind of similar experiences like that. I'm a little bit lucky. I think I have a little bit less trauma, just because I, for whatever reason, like saw things. Like when I'm usually giving artist lectures, I'll be like, here's this funny conservative painting of like the Trinity, like Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And then I'll show like a Hieronymus Bosch painting. And I'm like, this is kind of how I was seeing it though. And I was okay with that, you know? And maybe also, I mean, my family are quite conservative politically, but culturally, socially, they're not like, I don't know, they're pretty wild and crazy in some ways. But anyways, sorry. So the basketball, so I started this collective in 2010 called the New Craft Artists in Action. Originally, we were making these handmade basketball nets, hearkening to the original Peach Basket. And putting them on empty hoops that didn't have nets. It was partially a yarn bombing type of thing, but with conversations still with like history and utility and craft. And we were making them with people around the world. And I always wanted to paint a basketball court. I always wanted to kind of do the whole thing. I'm really into inventing games. And more recently, I've been finally kind of taking on the task of maybe writing about how games are magic in my mind, especially in terms of like diagrammatic sort of alchemy, like these diagrams on the ground that you activate with your body, you know, in time and space. And so it was a long process to get people to let me paint the first court, but I did this artist in residence thing with the city of Boston and collaborated with a community, a youth center for like 8 months. We made this pretty radically like organic court together. I mean, like people were drawing on the chalkboards saying what they wanted to paint in the court and we were painting it in. It's truly channeled. I mean, I really don't design these things in advance, hardly. I usually have like a motif, but yeah, seriously. It's hard to get people to trust me. but
I'm sorry. Maria was reacting to my shocked face because the intricacy of the art, it's shocking to me that this isn't like mathematically labored and agonized over. For please carry on. I'm gonna close my mouth if I can.
No. Well, I mean, it's definitely agonized over, and it is mathematically worked out, but kind of on the spot. I mean, it's kind of nuts. I'm like kind of drawing it as I go and paint, you know, almost like painting by numbers, like marking areas, and I have, you know, some assistance, but yeah, it's pretty wild. And so at a certain point, I think I was compartmentalizing. Well, I had been doing the basketball magic kind of stuff, but I was also compartmentalizing my work with youth and teens and some of my magic practice, because the way I was, you know, this is maybe some of the childhood trauma, you know, the way I was raised, that was not cool. And it was a problem enough in some cases that I'm queer and hiring mostly like queer and trans assistants, you know, to work on the courts. And for the most part, everyone's loved the courts, but the only pushback we've gotten is like we put down a few bands of color to start and people immediately are like, you're hiding gay symbols in the basketball court. I'm like, do you even know like the order of the colors in a rainbow? I mean, rainbows are great anyway. But anyways, so that's
All
the whole thing.
colors are a secret gay code. You use color?
It's great. It's wild. Like people just freak out. You see three bands of color, you know? But anyways, and so, but then a lot of other people started painting the courts, and it was kind of a tricky moment for me because I want other people to be doing these public artworks in their own cities. That's totally part of it, but also was like, anyway, trying to figure out what I could claim on it. And but it kind of gave me the liberty to say, well, I'm just going to do totally my own thing the way I want to do it. Like my work has helped establish that these courts are now a thing and all these municipalities are starting to do them. I'm going to do my version. And so I started, and so I actually call what I do social magic. Like people call it, you know, participatory art or social practice. I think of it as social magic. And one of my first courts was in Salem. And, you know, I figured I'd never go in with like, this is what we're going to do. I asked the students, like, what are y'all into? And they wanted to do a witch because, you know, Salem witches. But we would unpack, well, what does that mean to y'all? What does a witch look like to you? You know, is it a white lady on a broomstick like you see all over town? Or is it, you know, and this was in like a pretty Puerto Rican neighborhood too. So, you know, I'm getting a little too detailed into the courts, but that was kind of the beginning.
No, that's not too detailed. Nope. That's just getting juicy. What did the kids say? We need to know.
Well, it was really cute. They just started drawing all these witches, and like one of them kind of became the mascot of our project, and it was called like Cool Girl Witch. Like she had labeled it Cool Girl Witch, and it was like this really cool girl on a broomstick with like this big green wart. And but we ended up painting, it was called Tormenta on la Cancha, or like storming the court or storm on the court. And we ended up painting kind of this tempest with like there was just sort of these green claws and like a full moon basketball, like a basketball full moon phase around the free throw line. And then like the third eye was a 3-point line. And there were all these eyeballs. So it was kind of like a deconstructed like force of nature witch. And so then like the next few courts, I started learning a lot more about astrology, teaching myself a lot more about astrology, and really just thinking like, you know, now we have these drones, and that's one of the reasons that this groundwork is also becoming kind of big, is you can actually photograph it now. And so really thinking about the bird's eye view of things, and I'm like, you know, these are altars to the sky, you know, this, and I'm constantly thinking about what's happening above. I make a lot of work about stars and the sea as well. So, you know, as above, so below, of course. So then I started teaching. I did a court in New Bedford, Massachusetts, which is like whaling city. It's where Moby Dick was written. Like a lot of these cities have these, you know, kind of bleak trauma, like traumatic histories, and trying to figure out how to unpack that in kind of a liberating way. And so I asked the students, like they wanted to do something about whales. I try not to assume with mascots, you know, because we get like overly programmed with some of this stuff. They wanted to work with whales. So I said, okay, I'm going to teach you the nautical flag alphabet, because there's a nautical flag for every letter. And, you know, that's how boats used to communicate to each other from very far away before we had certain technology. And so I taught them the nautical flag system, and I said, what do you think whales might want to like send up to the creatures of the sky, whether it's like aliens or birds or just people in planes? And so, you know, they wrote out these like fun phrases. Actually, one of them said, what's up, what's down? And I was like, that's basically as above, so below. And so we painted these like hidden phrases into the court. And I can send y'all some photos of if you feel like posting them. And so, yeah. And so we, you know, there's a whole system, and a lot of the designs are kind of based on quilting patterns too, because that does give me at least some kind of geometric motif to work with. But yeah, and then I did another one in Fall River. And Fall River is like known to be a very haunted city, and that court was very interesting. It was a really bleak environment. Like it was outside of a middle school, and the students were super excited we were doing this, but they kept talking about like how bleak their middle school was. and how like depressing their middle school was, and like all of the animals and bugs and stuff on the court were behaving super weirdly, and there was a telephone pole that like snapped in the middle of like in a kind of a light storm in the middle of what we were working on, and it was just very strange. And that court, we actually painted the natal chart of the court into the center of it, and we started painting it on the Aries full moon, which was wild because I have an Aries moon and a Libra sun. So the basketball court had like kind of a similar birth chart to me just by chance. But we also like the idea that, Aries is about like this youthful, competitive, energetic, these energetic qualities. And then Libra is about friendship and balance and fairness. And so I like the idea of imbuing those energies into a court for youth. But they also we'd met with the art class and they've been drawing planets and flowers and orbs and balls. And, so we call that one Cosmic Court. And the recent basketball that I put out, like I've been putting out these basketball series that have the images, on them. Excuse me. So the Star Ball is dedicated to Senda and Sedna. And Senda Berenson was the founder of women's basketball at Smith College. Whereas Sedna is my favorite planetary body or trans-Neptunian object, planet Sedna, if you will, which is named after the Inuit sea goddess of the Arctic underworld. So, I had shared these essays with Amy that my friend Abigail Smithson and I wrote about Senda Berenson and Sedna and how they were both kind of firsts in a lot of ways. So, these are just connecting. I mean, people talk about Space Jam, but they don't know. They don't know their astrology necessarily.
Can you dig in a bit more to the Star Ball series?
Sure. So like I did the sea ball first, and that was based on my least community collaborative court, which was called a Seabird in 2021, but my most personal court, because it was in the middle of COVID, so we couldn't really engage with community as much, but it's my neighborhood court. It was down the street from my neighborhood, which is being very rapidly gentrified. And I live in this old artist, like protected, low rent artist building, but my neighborhood is like being crazy gentrified. And so they had actually torn down this church, Our Lady of Good Voyage, that I've made a lot of artwork about. It was a tiny, humble chapel. And I don't feel super at home in a lot of Catholic churches anymore, but this one was like very weird and special and felt very matriarchal. And like the Marys in the stained glass windows were brown, and there were all these like toy boats that people would come and like gift and leave on the windowsills, and it was just very special. And it was torn down, and then the people who like the like organization that is basically gentrifying our neighborhood very quickly, who tore it down, invited me to paint a court about a block away from it. So I basically painted a court that's about the same size as the footprint of the building, and dedicated it to what I call the Seabird, Our Lady the Seabird. I kind of have this sort of personal mythology, I guess, developed around the Seabird and the Sea Queen. And so that actually had an anti-gentrification spell hidden in it, written in nautical flags. And it was actually like my justice card year too. And I was thinking a lot about, I mean, the tarot is not necessarily directly linked to Egyptian mystery schools, but there are some correlations drawn at times. And so some people talk about the justice card in terms of Mott and the weighing the heart against a feather at the end of one's life. And so I was thinking a lot about feathers and how I could like reframe this idea of justice. And the Seabird, praying to the Seabird. I always set up an altar on the courts too first. And every morning when I walked out of my my apartment, I would see like a little feather on the ground, and they felt very, just very clear in a way they'd never been. So I kept collecting these little feathers. And when I made the sea ball, So it's basically the image of the court printed on a basketball. You know, it was a series of, I think, like 75 balls. I put an iridescent silver feather in the ball. And so I kind of think of these balls themselves as, I guess, spells, you know, or just at least like magic equipment. You know, I'm like, give your, you know, the game. It's funny how much we're talking about basketball, but the game of basketball is so obsessed with the element of air. You know, everything's like Air Jordan and get air, and you know, Michael Jordan is an Aquarius actually. And you know, it's all about getting air, and so I've identified with that a lot as a Libra my whole life actually. So I like to think about this ball having like this feather on it, and it kind of lifts, you know, not only the pressure of sports from young people, but also lifts the ball. And then the star ball had an iridescent silver comet, or like a foil comet in it. So they're each kind of their own spells. And yeah, and then like, you know, maybe just to speak to like many sort of iterations or kind of words for God, or the, you know, the seabird or the sea queen and all of this, you know, goddess. You would ask me about goddess, which is basically just like God, etc. Goddetc. It's so funny because I do not exactly remember when that came into my brain, but I love wordplay, like love wordplay. I mean, it's obviously wordplay is magic. But that just came to me. And I think I'm not sure I've ever separated it from like the phrase infinite goddess for myself. Like I've just always imagined it with this like infinity. I made these jerseys to go with the star balls that say infinite goddess on the back, but it's just pretty simple. It's just like God, etc., God and beyond, gender expansive God. I mean, I'm totally here for goddess and I'm totally here for godex. But it's kind of fun how goddess sounds like both of them, you know, just phonetically. It's like, and I think there's reasons that people use a double X that are like super cool and legitimate and like a part of a resistance. But I really do like thinking about gender expansion, because I just think, well, you know, it's important. And I think a lot of us didn't have access to some of this language. Like we could be non-binary or gender non-conforming or have this or that pronoun, or, you know, and I was definitely one of those people that I came out to my family as queer when I was like 38 or something. And mostly because I just didn't have the language. I didn't really know what I could definitively tell them I was. I mean, also they're quite conservative and everything, but I just I just didn't really have the language. And I think it's nice to come up with expansive containers for these things, and as varied as possible. So goddess is pretty playful. I mean, some of the like research and language I use is really like almost overworked and overthought and over researched, but this was just, it just came through, and it's fun and it makes sense, and it meant so much to me that it resonated with y'all. Like it just makes me really happy. So
yeah, that term was huge for us. Like I immediately, and we mention you every time we bring it up pretty much, because
I'm
we
so
really are like,
grateful.
and we love your work so much. Like I think I was maybe distracting you while you were talking, because I'm like physically bouncing up and down like a little basketball, like so excited. So I know so many of our listeners, like they feel like they are an artist and they want to do large scale or small scale. You know, you cover all of these bases is the wrong sport, but
I love baseball.
but I want to know, like, how can our listeners, our coven mates, conjure this sense of freedom and ability to just make art?
That is such a great and both simple and difficult question to answer. I mean, my outlook, I've thought about this so much over the years, especially because I'm often teaching young people who are just at that age where they think they have to identify with like one thing or another, especially in terms of like sports or art. And where they're just starting to get self-conscious, like in the negative ways, and I'm definitely of the camp that anyone can be an artist, everyone should be an artist, everyone has that innate like vision and ability, just like magic and just like intuitive ability, and some of us come into the world with a bit more access to it through our like family line, or our astrology, or our environment, and others don't, and we Canada is very different, from what I understand, at least I feel like Europe and Canada, at least art is kind of like a basic part of life, that has some funding. And I mean, yeah, I definitely don't want to over romanticize it, of course, but the United States is like very kind of programmed to be distrustful of art. And I think that has a lot to do with our Puritan roots and just labor and what's valuable, and of course fear of magic and the other in general. But so I think it's really important that people pull creativity out of themselves. And then when we're talking about, so I often say anyone can be an artist, but not tomorrow, which I just mean like I also want to give my profession or my practice the respect of, I've been doing this for 20 years and this is real, and this is like a real job, and a real path. So because it took me a while to give myself that that validation, or and then also treat my worth that way. But I think that, like magic, I mean, I believe that art is magic. Maybe not all art is magic, but I completely believe that art is magic. And some people disagree with me, but like magic, there's so many things that you can do that are art, or that you're already doing. And I remember, I think it was probably Sarah Gottesdiener had said something in one of her Moon books about like turning out the lights is magic. And or she's like, make magic every day. And so like every time I'm running out the door and I haven't turned the lights off, I go, make magic every day, and I run back in and like turn the lights off, and I'm like, conserving energy is a form of magic, and I'm like, that's magic. But also, so is some really elaborate spell. And also magic is things I was doing when I was 7 years old and had no idea, or even 20 whatever years old and had no idea. And so that, I think, is similar with art. I mean, there is a phrase that mostly kind of socially engaged art communities were using, living as form. I was in an exhibition called Living as Form that Creative Time organized. And I relate so much to that. I think everything I do is art. Like putting on my clothes is art and magic. Cooking, I'm not necessarily an artisanal food. I'm not exactly a kitchen witch, and I hope I will have a greener thumb when someday too. But you all find your ways, and I think if you can look at what you're already doing and develop that, but also pick up some crayons, pick up some paper, whatever. I mean, I still do not, you would be surprised how self-conscious and down on myself I still get. I've been making art for 20 years. I've been a full-time artist for like, I don't know, at least 5 or 6. And I still think I don't know what I'm doing. I still get paralyzed when I pick up paper. I don't know which medium I want to work in. I'm not sure like what my drawing style is. But it's all valid. Like we're taught that we're supposed to draw faces or draw things to look realistic. And that's just like one tiny way that art can look, and I mean, it's just anytime you're manipulating materials, you can make art. And I loved, Amy had sent me a few questions in advance of this, and you kind of spoke to it a moment ago. I love that you asked me about scale. It's so astute, because you're right. I mean, you probably don't know that I guess you do. I work very tiny. not miniature, but small and massive. I mean, like, um, 20,000 square feet, you know? um, and I think the reason I really like the small and the large is because it really activates the body in a way. It makes things really relevant to the body because I'm either creating a space for people to exist in or activate with their bodies, or something that could be like held, almost like a talisman. And my partner and I were actually talking last night. I'm not going to have all the facts on this, but it was like they were listening to a podcast or something, and they were talking about maybe the moment that humans became humans, like whatever that means, was sort of when humans started creating art, which is interesting. And but you have and I, you know, I mean, I agree that that's a special. I mean, I'm not saying animals don't make art and that humans. I mean, we're animals, but there's something interesting there. But is I think where what I love about art is that it's not utilitarian, it's something else. But I think where like the contemporary art world or market has kind of gotten away from what it's supposed to be is that it's not utilitarian, but I do think that art was applied in some way, and usually in some spiritual way. You know, usually objects are being created to be used in some kind of transcendent spiritual way. And so I mean, I love art museums. Like it still changes my life, you know. But I think the reason I gravitate towards making something that's more of like a handheld or totally consuming has a bit to do with its activation and application, and just how I think those are the kind of OG inherent properties of art. So,
This is such an interesting starting place too for people with that question of like, how do I start to make art? I loved when you said they're I wrote it down. I have to read it. The like magic, there are so many things you can do that are art. But I love that way of thinking about it. And so I think for me, and I offer this to the listeners as a takeaway, like the next time I feel that like pulse in me to make something, to let it be something that I'll use in my spiritual practice, whatever that looks like for me. So like to go weave sticks in my Hecate bower, or you know, like make it
ooh,
something that's yeah, you have to come up. But yeah, make so to like give my, it's almost like that's the assignment, that's the homework, you know. It's like give that art practice that I'm going to do today, when I'm like, what's the medium and what am I going to do, and like why am I even painting anyway? It's like that's the homework. Make something that will be part of how I am looking at the universe, or how I am asking questions of my magic or something.
1,000%, 1,000%. And one thing I forgot to mention is I think for a few years in my, like, right when I got out of undergrad. I mean, it's so funny because my professors were like literally like, go into a cave and paint until you're like 35 and don't come out. And I was like, okay. And I literally went into my like moldy basement and painted and was like, I'm sad.
And done well.
Yeah. And also like now I have like mold poisoning from that. But that was actually really how some of the basketball stuff started too, was I was just like, how can I like be outside and move my body and still make art and like meet people and, you know, learn about the city I've been living in. But for the first few years, I could not actually finish anything unless it was a present for someone. And I started making these, oh, what were they? Oh, what was that term? Stimulus packages. Like that was a whole thing, you know, in the United we it was around the time Obama was elected, and we were getting, you know, there were the stimulus packages, and I was making creative stimulus packages for friends, and they were like, I would go in my moldy basement like a crazy maniacal bat and like stay up all night and make these crazy interactive assemblages for friends that I would mail them with like weird instructions, like filling balloons with like glitter and some like weird secret key, and they had to like pop it with some like glittery like thumb like thing that I like strap on thumb that I made. or just whatever. And in mixtapes, they always came with mixes. And I mean, that was all I felt motivated to do for a while. And there was a point where I did kind of be like, okay, Molteni, you gotta like, if you're gonna do this professionally, you gotta like, whatever, make something of all of this. But I still just love making gifts. So seriously, make gifts for yourselves, make gifts for your ancestors, make gifts for, yeah, like Hecate, like, you know, um, I think that's also what the first, whatever, quote, humans, that I think is what they were doing often too, is making gifts for each other. So.
And on the subject of useful art, what's scopa?
Oh, great question. So Scopa is one of the oldest, to my knowledge, I should say it's definitely most popular Italian card game. And I did not grow up with tarot cards, because that was not part of my family, and I didn't get a crazy aunt, to introduce me to magic. But I loved playing cards. I mean, my friends and I was like a card shark, and like could do all the like kind of crazy shuffling, and we would play for hours and hours on the floor, and often at summer camp, which was like super, super witchy. But that was like my first, it was so witchy. I mean, we would like, well, anyway, this is sidetrack, but it's kind of the best. We would have like these middle of the night pee parties, because like you had to walk really, really far to the bathrooms from the cabins, where we would just like, we would literally like hold hands in a 5-pointed star and like pee together and just do like crazy things. And this was actually had been like a Catholic summer camp, but it wasn't like church camp. It was just, again, kind of started by this like community, community of people. But it was so witchy. But so we would play cards all the time, and for hours and hours. And so, yeah, playing cards is a huge part of my life. And I did not know about Scopa because I did not have, my grandfather, who was, I guess you could say, like probably the keeper of the most like Italian American knowledge or culture in my family, he passed away before I was born. So I didn't really get some of the like access, I guess, to my like heritage or ancestry that some of my friends did. So I didn't learn how to play Scopa from him, but I learned to play Scopa because in 2017, I was in Croatia doing a project with a collective called Queer Sport Split. And on my very last day there, I'd finished the project. I went to this island, one of the Dalmatian islands, Vis, for this like swimming race that was supposed to be very casual, but ended up being very competitive, like this Adriatic Sea swimming race. And the next day, I went to this like really cool like coastal cemetery that I'd been kind of eyeing during the race from the water, and kind of like walked around it for a while, and then ended up going for my very last swim in the ocean at the moment that the great solar eclipse in Leo was happening, in 2017. And I was kind of just like, Maria, why did you book your flight home tomorrow? What were you thinking? Like I was having super eclipse FOMO, especially because a lot of people were going to Tennessee to see it. So I went for this swim in the ocean and was literally like under the water having like my personal eclipse and like meditating on that and trying to be like with it, with the sun and everything. And as I was coming near the shore to get out, like a little closer to the shore, I noticed down at the bottom of the sea, there was this card lodged between two rocks. And I actually was wearing my goggles for once. And I swam down to pick it up. And it was this card that said like Fante di Spade on it, which is literally Page of Swords. And I was like, what is this card? It kind of looks like a tarot card, but it kind of looks like a playing card. And it literally translates to Page of Swords. So that says tarot card to me, but this isn't a tarot card. And it wasn't until, I got home to Boston the next day, called my best friend Aya, who was like my moon buddy in Providence, Rhode Island, told her about the whole thing. And she was like, that's wild. She calls me the next morning, texts me the next morning, and is like, I just found a strange card on the street, and sends me a photo of it. And it's also this very weird, is that a playing card? Is that a tarot card? She's like, I've never seen anything like this. And it was clearly the Ace of Wands. I mean, that was the vibe. And I was like, that is so strange. And so neither of us knew what the deal was. And about 6 months later, I got snowed in at a friend's house in Connecticut. And we are like, I guess let's play cards. And they were like, I don't really have any cards. Oh, wait, my friend brought me this deck back from Sicily, and showed me the deck. And I was like, this is totally not the exact precise deck, but this is totally the type of deck that my card and Aya's card came from. I know it is. And it's basically just an Italian playing card deck. And so we looked up, like, what do we do with these cards? Scopa is the most popular game. So we taught ourselves to play Scopa right then, and I've been addicted ever since. It's so much fun. And then I learned that there are these regional cards. Like every region in Italy kind of has its own style, and it's like the southern Italian cards are mostly influenced by Spanish suits, and the northern Italian cards kind of have their own suit language, and then the sort of kind of northwestern Italian like provinces have kind of French inspired suits. And it's a whole thing that I'm like so dorky about, because ever since I started reading tarot, I was like fascinated by how you could read with playing cards. And that was what happened before tarot was, I mean, my recent zine, Counting to Infinity, Games or Magic, talks about how tarot was a game before it was a practice of divination, at least as far as we can know. We don't know when people started reading playing cards. And there are a lot of different theories, but tarot is basically a little different, but it's basically just the major arcana, or like I trionfi, added to a deck of Italian playing cards. The only difference is Italian playing cards, their court cards are actually embedded within the ace through 10. So like the page is an 8, the knight or queen is a 9, and the king is a 10. So but of course, the coolest thing about Scopa is that it means broom, or to sweep in Italian. And that is because the object of the game is to sweep the cards off of the floor or playing surface. But also Scopa in Italy means to fuck. So there's all kinds of fun, innuendos. And it's such a magical game. And I basically, well, I can give y'all a moment to speak, but there was a lot of really crazy ancestral magic that started coming into my life, like in really around 2019, but up until this past year, like I just kind of started asking for things, but also just downloading weird phrases. Like I was like tripping on mushrooms, and and a blue bird told me to like hold my mother tongue, and then it just like came back into my head a year later, and I'm like, what does this mean? And kind of started relearning Italian, but I'm not like super great at Italian language, and then realized, oh, but like cards, like visual languages, and games are language too, and cooking is language, all of this. So I started playing Scopa with my partner Jay every night of 2022, after I had this this ceremonial and ancestral sword come into my life that was my great grandfather's. This is a whole other thing, but it's a Knights of Columbus sword, which is like, problematic and strange, but used to be kind of a different thing than it is now. And so the sword came in, and I'd made this handmade rosary while watching the movie Contact, and then like kind of hung the rosary the sword to kind of get Mary to like train the like Christopher to like behave himself and change his ways. And my partner and I just started playing Scopa, and every night after we finished playing, we would pull from either the Scopa deck, which is just an Italian playing card deck, or from this gorgeous Milanese historic deck. I think it's the Soprafina that my partner ordered me like a reprint of. And we would pull a card for the sword, the rosary, the game, the work, which is basically just this big project I was working on, and each of ourselves. And I don't know if that's how divination started, but I like the idea that that's kind of how it organically was for us. You know, so yeah, so that's Scopa in general. I mean, I can talk a little bit about Stelle Scopa, but I want to
Yeah.
give
And
y'all
we
some time to speak.
no, all I want to say is, can you please tell us more about? And I'm going to finish that sentence with your deck design, your deck creation.
Of course, I would love to. So, so around the time I got the sword and we were playing Scopa every night, I was invited to have a show in Nashville, my very first show, and it was really exciting for me because I've never really felt appreciated in my hometown or had many opportunities. And I was kind of I was developing some fun work. I don't know if y'all have heard of the movement like Memphis design, but okay, okay. I love Memphis design. Well,
Oh my goodness, Memphis style is my favorite. And just for those of you who are Googling, it's like that late 80s. It's geometric. I wish I could spin my computer around so that you could see I did my whole bedroom in Memphis style. Maybe I'll grab a sheet later or something, but it's my absolute favorite. And everybody's so over it except for you and me. So I'm like so happy. Okay. Calm down, Amy.
no, that makes me so happy because I was like, here's a tangent I could go down or not. But no, I think you and I appreciate it because like it kind of came back as a fad, but I don't think a lot of people like really understand. But Memphis design is so funny to me because it's like these Milanese. I failed to say that my ancestors, like my Fortunato, my great great grandfather, is who came over from Italy, and he came from Milano. So I'm sorry to all of my Siciliano friends. My family is from northern Italy, but I don't actually know a whole lot about it. I mean, I just don't have access to a lot of the information from his time, etc. But that, Milano is kind of known to be the like birthplace of modern tarot. But also is these Milanese designers that came up with Memphis design. And the idea is that they visited actually some town in India, or like I don't know if you know, I forget like what it's called, but they visited this like beautiful town in India that had all these gorgeous like houses. And I think they were also thinking about Memphis and Egypt. But then they were like listening to Bob Dylan. And so Memphis design is actually kind of based on, it's kind of this smash together aesthetic between like Italy, Egypt, maybe part of India, and Tennessee. And I'm this like Tennessee Italian like weirdo who also like loves this aesthetic because it's also very like 1980s sporty, all of the like, and I've made a lot of work with kids about like action painting and how it's used on athletic wear, and we've like designed our own garments by like flinging paint around and blah blah blah. But so I really resonate with Memphis design for like a lot of reasons, and think it's really funny. And Memphis, Tennessee has this giant pyramid that actually has like live crocodiles living in the bottom of it. I visited it like 2 years ago. But Nashville, which is a very different city and has very different history from Memphis. I mean, Memphis is more known for blues, and like Nashville is sort of more known for like the country music industry. But we have an exact replica of the Parthenon in Nashville. And before I ever knew where like Greece was on the map or the Acropolis or anything, we were like hanging out at the Parthenon, like birthday parties at the Parthenon, and with the giant Athena inside, like my friend's dad sculpted the giant Athena and everything. So I was just kind of like ruminating on these ideas. This will probably become a future body of work because I kind of took a turn for the Scopa, but I was just like, how can I maybe kind of make work about being sort of Milanese and then having this, they call Nashville the Athens of Greece, and like also talk a little bit about like colonial theft also, between like Greece and Egypt. And there's even like a little bit more privilege in Nashville than there is in Memphis, and there's like a relationship there, etc. But anyway, and like my other grandparents on my mom's side are like like Scotch Irish, like competitive square dancing, farmer, country folk. Yeah, like very, very different from the other side of the family. So like that's where a lot of the quilting and everything comes from. So I was like making these quilts kind of inspired by like this idea of Memphis design. But so I was working on that, and that's why I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna play rummy, kind of in honor of my mom's mom, because we would play rummy together. But then I was like, looked at this ancestral sword, and I was like, I want to play scopa. And so I ended up developing a body of work that are drawings of my hands. So this was for the show in Nashville, drawings of my hands, holding this. Actually, the whole idea came to me in an acupuncture session, like literally just, it was nuts. And I basically came home from acupuncture, corralled all the stones in my apartment. I didn't even realize how many I have, but I have like stones everywhere. Put them all in the bathtub on the Pisces new moon, threw the sword in there, put the rosary in there, some of my shells and stuff, and had this kind of like epic, like witchy spell of my life or whatever, played sounds of the moon and sounds of Pluto and everything over the bath, and just kind of blessed and cleared these stones, and then ended up photographing picked 50 of them and made sort of a rosary from them, because I started thinking about this process of bead-based prayer, body-based prayer. You know, I've had a complex relationship with the rosary over the years, because it is like a Catholic prayer, but it's older than Catholicism, et cetera, et cetera. I've rewritten some of my own versions of the prayer, made my own rosary that has like a bell on the end. But I made this stone rosary and then photographed my hands holding each of the stones, and then took the stone out and basically drew portraits of my hands with like where the stone would be. And when I was a kid, I used to pray on my fingers, like if I didn't have my rosary. And so I actually in my 20s was making these funny prayers about praying the rosary, where I'd color the fingers in depending on which count I was on. And for anyone who's not familiar with the rosary, there are 5 decades of 10 Hail Mary prayers with beads in between that you say different prayers on. And so I've used that structure for like a lot of performances and things. So I made these drawings. I called them Counting to Infinity. The show in Nashville had the stones kind of laid out in a rosary shape that was also the shape of Sedna, planet Sedna's orbit. I became obsessed with planet Sedna this year. She has like a 12,000 year orbit and is coming very close to Earth again for the first time. And it's like more or less supposed to bring about the fall of the patriarchy and all kinds of, you know, like underworld magic. And so I made that work, and then randomly get an invitation to show in Venice with very little, like Venice, Italy, very little notice. And I was just like, whoa, the ancestors are just like, they're like, it's time, you know, like you're going to do all these things. You're going to show in your hometown. You're going to go and show like in Northern Italy. So I developed the hand drawings into a deck of cards. And so all of the suits are objects made from stone. And originally I was thinking of them as like almost like structures made from stone. But then when I actually went to Italy, I decided there's so many beautiful things carved from stone and even like reliefs. So I ended up photographing objects. So it's so funny that I don't have the cards up here, but I can grab them in a minute. But the cards, where a typical Scopa deck has 40 cards, yeah, I'll grab them in just a second. My deck has 61 because that's the number of beads in a rosary. And so I added a 5th suit, basically. I have like 4 suits of 10 cards, added a 5th suit of 10 cards. So that's kind of like the suit of ether, if you will. And assigned, let's see, obelisks to air, pine cones to fire, gravestones to earth, which was a pretty fun choice, wells to water, and labyrinths to the sort of 5th suit of like ether or spirit or whatever you'd like to call it, the other. And then added 11 asteroids because I needed 11 more cards to get to 61, because they're kind of like the stones of space is how I think about it. So that's almost like my deck's, you don't play with those cards, but that's kind of like my deck's major arcana, if you will. And the last thing I'll say, because I know I've just been like rattling stuff off, the reason I named it Stellescopa is basically translates in a way to sweeping stars or broom stars, is because I found in a book I was reading about comets and asteroids that was gifted to, well, indirectly gifted to me by my late neighbor, Paul Laffoley, who's a magical painter. I found a line about how ancient Chinese astronomers used to refer to comets with characters that translate to broom stars or sweeping stars. So they saw comets as like brooms flying through the sky. So my deck has this kind of like terrestrial, celestial connections, like a lot of my other work. And I'll just grab the cards really fast, and that way I can show you. And I developed like the game is still very, very close to the original, but I added some kind of slightly magical twists to it, to include some divination. And so this is the box here. So you can see this is the rosary with the different suits on it. And then this is the planet Sedna, the glyph for planet Sedna, actually. And then, Stellescopa, sweeping stars. This is cantando, or thank you.
Of course, listeners, there will be visual aids on our website, but even the box is stunningly beautiful and like holographic.
Thank you so much. It's got a little made in Italy. And then these are the cards. So at the back of the cards have these brooms, these like iridescent or foil brooms and stars. And I did a lot of the I used these like Cosmotesco floor mosaic motifs for a lot of the artwork I've made for the deck. It was just a style of floor mosaic because I really like this idea of also the game's connection to my work on the ground, and sort of sweeping and playing on the ground. So yeah, these are the asteroids have the comet backs, and all the other playing cards have the broom backs. And then you can see some of the fronts have foil as well. This is from the suit of labyrinths, but so it has my hand drawings and then the different suit icons. And yeah, I know the listeners will not be able to see this right now, but yeah.
But go to missingwitches.com or to your website. We'll tag all of that stuff. But I have one final question before we get to like, how can we buy your stuff and support your work? What are you doing for spring equinox?
Such a good question. So I am preparing myself very much for a summer solstice project I'm going to do, and it brings that Christopher Columbus sword kind of back into context, because I'll be painting this massive work on the grounds that's not a basketball court, that is actually sited right next to the our formerly beheaded Christopher Columbus statue. So I've called a few friends of mine, some of them I've called a few of my like queer, gender expansive, Italian American witch friends to engage this work once it's painted with me in a performance, where we're more or less going to like replace Christopher Columbus's head with Medusa's head. in a way, or at least
so Vin Caponegro is involved.
Is definitely involved.
Oh, okay,
exactly.
good.
Yeah, Vin's going to be one of them. My friend Theo, my friend Ash Capaccione, Laura Campagna is like our resident astrologer. Yeah, Vin's involved. And exactly, we're going to be kind of replacing it with Medusa consciousness, you could say, and kind of melting down our old tools of our old ancestral tools that are no longer working in this heat of the sun, and like reshaping them. So I'm just like really thinking of today as like getting in that mindset and really getting organized for that. I also I'm going to go see a screening of a short film called Jupiter's Moons at the Harvard Film Archive. So
Perfect.
those are my plans.
A perfect balance. You're such an equinox character, you know, like sporty and nerdy and artsy and witchy and academic and intuitive. Like I think we started this episode introducing you as one of our favorite contemporary artists. And I mean, if anything, this conversation has only like expanded my adoration for the depth of your work. How can our listeners buy your shit, support your work, like send you their good vibes of love and encouragement?
Oh yeah, thank you. God, that is also kind of you. Thank you so much. It's so fun to nerd out.
I'm just a reporter. I'm just telling you what I see. You did the work. I'm just telling you it's rad.
Thank you, my fellow Memphis design freak. So my website is Maria Molteni, and that's Molteni, Molteni, mariamolteni.com. On Instagram, I'm Strega_Maria. And yeah, I mean, I do have my deck up and available for purchase, and also this altar cloth I made for it, which is like the playing surface for the game. And just made a zine to go with the deck. Have my basketballs up there, and I do have a Patreon as well, so where I publish a lot of my like research and writing on everything from Italian playing cards and tarot to like the shakers and body-based prayer and magic. And so
There's
it's all linked
so
in my
much,
Instagram.
so much we didn't get to. You'll have to come back. You'll have to come back on the show because your body of work is so expansive. Like shaker workouts, I'll just leave that as a cliffhanger for our next conversation. But I do want to say, listeners, if you want to engage in Maria's work and celebrate the spring equinox and as above, so below, and just really embody Maria's practice, please immediately go to their or our website and watch the Venusian rosacea video. It is honestly a spell. Just watching the video, you were talking before about like how drones have sort of expanded, working on the ground because we have this bird's eye view. I'm telling you, I watched it and I felt it in my body. I could taste it in my mouth. It was one of the most beautiful pieces of art that I have seen in recent memory, contemporary art that I have seen in recent memory. So listeners, please just go and do that now as part of your Ostara or spring equinox ritual. Watch this Venusian rosacea video. It will change your day, if not your life.
Oh my God, thank you so much. I
Like,
mean,
it's
honestly, I
stunning.
feel so close to it as well. And the piece we're going to do this summer is going to be similar, like, and just in terms of getting a really rich video of like actually a more elaborate ritual. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Go watch it right now. We're wrapping up here, so fucking go watch it like right now. So thank you so much for joining us to celebrate the spring equinox today. Again, I can't think of a more colorful character to welcome the coming spring and to share this circle with. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you everyone for being here.
Do you have any parting words for our listeners?
I would just say thank you so much. It's just been such a dream to talk to y'all. I have so much respect for you, and it's so cool. I always feel moments like this. I'm like, my high school self or my teenage self would be so jazzed. Some things are really hard about being a contemporary full-time artist, but there are moments like this where I'm like, I feel really great about where I'm at. So thank you so much.
I feel really
and
great
thank you
about
all.
Where you're at and where you're going. Oh my goodness. The past, present, and future, please keep us posted and tell Vin we said a blessed fucking be.
I will.
Happy Ostara. Blessed fucking be.
Absolutely will.
You must be a witch.
Missing Witches is created and produced by Risa Dickens and Amy Torek. If you want to support the Missing Witches project, find out how at missingwitches.com.